the worst advice that society tells women is to view traditional motherhood and being the mainstay of a home as an interruption to their living their best life. I don't know what people think the purpose of life is. I don't know why they think souls came to this world for embodiment, but it wasn't to have a good time. It wasn't to seek personal fulfillment, even. We came here to contribute to a cause greater than ourselves. And one of the primary ways that we contribute to a cause greater than ourselves is by building families. To tell a woman that being a wife and a mother could be in conflict with her purpose. Please understand, I'm not saying the only purpose of women is to be wives and mothers. There are many contributions that people make. People have varieties of talents and abilities, but at the same time, please don't underplay the incredible importance of being a wife and a mother.
Today, I hope to shine my giant floodlight on this submissive wife bullshit. And if you're a woman, you're going to want to listen up. I have spent the past 7 years of my life since leaving Mormonism, my abusive ex husband of 24 years, and MAGA, and literally everything that my life was before, speaking out against submissive womanhood. And whenever I do a documentary or an interview, or I'm featured in a TV show or anything like that, I'll drop a few of those in the description, by the way. The main talking point is almost always about controlling women. And people want to know why. Why does anyone want to control women like this? Well, here's a secret that you're not going to hear anywhere else. This isn't about controlling women, it's about replicating the system. And they need our bodies to do it. Ladies, MAGA and Project 2025 and Christian nationalism and all those other movements, they do not care about you. They actually hate you. And despite appearances, this isn't mainly about controlling women at all. Yes, they're coming for our rights. They're parading the traditional family out there in front of everybody. They're reviving the whole stay at home mom, housewife slash tradwife brand. But that's just the costume. The plot is protection of a system that only survives if we women carry it. This crackdown on women's rights that we're seeing right now isn't about subjugation, it's about replication. Women in the patriarchy are the copy paste button for the patriarchy. We create the new little army of members and then we program them. Copy, paste, copy, paste. That should terrify all of us, but who it really terrifies is them. Because the moment we refuse to host their system, it stops reproducing. I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. Hey everybody, I'm Jenny. I know there's a lot of great stuff out there on YouTube. I always appreciate you stopping on one of my videos. I am former MAGA, Christian nationalist, white supremacist, alt-right, prepping Mormon tradwifey. I left the Mormon church 7 years ago, escaped domestic violence 2 weeks after that, after 24 years of marriage. And 2 years ago, I broke up with Jesus and Donald Trump and the MAGA party. So, what I try to do on my channel here is share my firsthand insider knowledge from within that community with you. This is a topic that I think it's time we all understand for what it really is, because it will make a lot of what you're seeing out there click into place. Systems need to replicate. They need to be able to replace themselves. Think of your car as a system. It's an individual transportation system. If your car breaks down, we need to be able to buy another car. We need to replicate that. The biblical, submissive, MAGA, mom, tradwife crap isn't about controlling the women. I was a tradwife for 24 years, and I know this like the back of my hand. The tradwife model uses the women to control the children, to protect their purity and replicate the system so it keeps going. Social purity, educational purity, nutritional purity, religious purity, sexual purity, of course, cultural purity, and racial purity. If the next generation isn't taught and protected, the system doesn't replicate and it just all stops. It collapses. It falls apart. It doesn't exist in the future anymore. It ceases to exist. It extincts. The tradwife creates and trains the replacement. She is the copy paste button. It does annoy me when I hear people talk about traditional families and the push for women to be more traditional as though it's a trend. You'll hear this phrase, the trad wife trend. Well, this wasn't a trend. This was my life. And this was the life of most of the women around me. It's not a lifestyle trend, it's a political technology, a replication engine. And I was once part of this engine. At my Mormon wedding to my stinky ex husband, Jake, I was commanded to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. I wasn't even given an option of, well, maybe you'll want to have kids, maybe you won't. Why don't you decide for yourself? I was under command inside the Mormon temple. That's part of the wedding. My literal naked pelvis was washed with water and then anointed with oil that I would be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. You guys, watching The Handmaid's Tale to me was just like, this isn't even far fetched. That was just my life. May the womb open. I now pronounce you man and wife. My Mormon prophet, Spencer W. Kimball, who was the head of the church when I was a kid growing up, said, quote, I beg of you, you who could and should be bearing and rearing a family, wives, come home from the typewriter, the laundry, the nursing, come home from the factory, the cafe. No career approaches in importance that of wife, mother, homemaker, cooking meals, washing dishes, making beds for one's precious husband and children. He keeps going. Come home, wives, to your children, born and unborn. Wrap the motherly cloak around you and, unembarrassed, help in major role to create the bodies for the immortal souls who anxiously await. End quote. Translation, replicate the system. I was the copy paste button. When you see the pastel aprons and sourdough reels, you're not just seeing tradition, you're seeing a child rearing supply chain designed to preserve a specific social order. Here's how that replication works. And the trad wife is the mechanism that makes all of this happen. She has to be there in the home with the kids in the home with her, or this all falls apart. Number one, gatekeeping inputs. Homeschool or tight school control. This is the educational purity. Education in isolation is the goal so that there's no outside information coming into the next generation. My parents public schooled me, but I also did Mormon seminary daily during high school. It's actually one of my credits. I walked across the street to the church and got indoctrinated for an hour and then went back to the school. I was never allowed to take sex ed. Like when they had sex ed, my parents sent a note into the school. Then I went and sat in the library instead of learning how my body worked. So I was shocked when I started my period and had no idea why there was blood coming out of me. I had family scripture study before school for my kids forever. I would read 2 verses, they could eat their breakfast or whatever, but I made sure that if they were going to walk out the door and go to that public school, that I had flooded their brains with scriptures, had family prayer before they left. And when my kids left for school every day, I told them, return with honor. There's a lot of meaning in that. By the way, my public education taught me to think critically and would eventually be a huge part of me leaving all the cults. So, this having a mom at home to educate the kids in isolation, it's a really important component. Number two, the stay-at-home mom gatekeeps peers. Keep kids at home so they don't date or play with outsiders. I wasn't allowed to date non-Mormons. My mom almost never let me go to the homes of non-Mormons. And because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, she had eyes on me at all times. So she knew not just that I was safe, but that I wasn't having any outside worldly influence from my peers. Number 3, gatekeeping culture. That tradwife is a curator of books, music, news. This is the cultural purity component. I spent a lot of my life as a trad wife running my kids to the right dance classes, the right soccer teams, the right play dates, and exposing them to the world I wanted them to see. Hiking, camping, gardening, baking, theater, and of course, so much church stuff. My kids lived the life that the ballerina farms kids lived, and it was magical. And I was able to take them to the art museums and take them canoeing in a pristine mountain lake because I didn't have a job. My job was to curate their cultural experiences. Number 4, it's the trad wife's job to gatekeep their bodies. Now, there's a lot of labor that goes into this. Food prep was a massive part of my trad wife duties. If you've ever watched Nora Smith, I said that I was part of the slow food revolution. I cooked all of our own bread from wheat that I ground in my own whisper mill. If I was going to make pancakes in the morning, I walked out to the chicken house, grabbed a couple eggs out from under my hens, picked the strawberries out of the garden, went to a neighbor's farm where I got the milk, whipped the cream, and boom, breakfast was ready in a couple of hours. I boycotted McDonald's for an entire decade. My kids didn't eat what I called the SAD diet, the standard American diet. My children were God's chosen vessels, and I took their diet very seriously. Breast milk for baby, that gets really tricky if you're a working mom. My kids didn't have store-bought formula. I really looked down on that. All the fresh ground wheat and chickens in the yard, homegrown fruit and vegetables. We had all these orange trees and pear trees and peach trees and all this stuff. Raw goat milk. My kids still talk about their brown snack bags when I picked them up from school to take them to gymnastics and soccer and their vocal coaching and all those different things, I would never, like, take them through the Sonic drive-through type of thing ever. I would pack these brown lunch bags with all of their snacks. It was usually, like, some fresh squeezed juice or a freshly made little protein shake in a glass jar, of course, because I didn't wanna expose them to any plastics, and then I'd have some homemade hummus and fresh chopped vegetables, little charcuterie things, homemade granola bars, sandwich made out of freshly ground peanut butter, homemade blackberry jam, and the homemade bread, all that stuff. My kids still talk about how much they'd hate to get in the car after school, and there's their sad little brown paper bag sitting on the seat, but I wanted to make sure that their bodies were pure. I was Ballerina Farm when Ballerina Farm was in high school. Everything was homegrown and cooked for strength. By the way, it's really interesting how many historical propaganda posters there are around the purity of food. We should all note how many regimes sold purity through food. Father grows, mother cooks, children grow up healthy and obedient. And there's a lot of agricultural propaganda with the fresh milk and the fresh wheat, which are just dog whistles for modern agricultural civilization. This is not new. The whole milkmaid thing and the traditional moms cooking their kids all this healthy sourdough bread, this isn't new, but it is effective. Number 5 is gatekeeping identity. When the kids are with mom most of the time while dad's off at work, she is able to protect their superiority, their class. I curated the groups that my children moved in, rooting them to our family and our socioeconomic status and the roles that the system wanted them to embrace with no outside influence. My kids were with me all the time. We called outside influence worldly, by the way. I didn't want my kids to have any worldly influence. The trad wife protects all these things. Number 6, that stay-at-home mom is able to gatekeep her children's sexuality. I used to talk with other moms about stats around how many kids without stay-at-home moms had sex while their moms were at work. All those working moms or kids are just losing their virginity willy-nilly. Being home allowed me to have an iron fist on their sex lives because I was there all the time. My son, when he was a junior in high school, had a girlfriend, and one day she was over at our house after school and they'd been together for a couple of months, and I just didn't like the vibe. Now, she was this cute little country girl. She was so sweet. She had a great family, but she was Baptist. And that afternoon, I was standing looking out the kitchen window at my son and this girlfriend walking down the lane together. And I didn't like the way she kind of slid her hand down to his butt when she kissed him. So I went outside, told my son, "You're not allowed to have this girlfriend anymore." I walked this little 16-year-old high school girl down to the end of our lane, and I told her, "You can no longer date my son. I am officially breaking up with you for him. And if I ever see you around my son again, I will make your life miserable. You're no longer allowed in my home. Don't sit by him at lunch. I'm going to call the school and let them know that I don't want you guys to have any contact." My mom did stuff like that to me all the time. And in case you are a new parent, this causes the Romeo and Juliet effect and decades of therapy. So, gatekeeping your kid's sexuality is not a great idea. I had this feet on the floor rule too. If any of my kids had a girlfriend or boyfriend over and they were kissing, their feet had to be on the floor. They couldn't be laying down on the couch. This high control system doesn't care what the wife is doing at home. I mean, she's fairly trustworthy. They care about protecting the sexual purity, the dietary purity, the cultural purity of the next generation. That's their target. The worst bit is this next one, and this is racial purity, kind of a hidden pillar of the traditional family. And it's important that we talk about it because we have to name the thing most of these tradition accounts and influencers won't. Racial purity is a core pillar of the replication machine. And it's not always shouted, it's often whispered in very cloaked language. Heritage, bloodline, genealogy. I was always working on my genealogy as a Mormon kid. Ancestral pride, preserving our culture, good families. That language isn't neutral. It's code for who is allowed to belong and who is kept outside the gates. Here's how that shows up. Dating gates sounds like this: "Our kids don't date outsiders." Translation: "Keep the circle racially and religiously closed so the bloodline stays pure." Homeschool or private pods framed as values often become filters controlling books, history, and who your children sit next to. Neighborhood gates. You'll hear phrases like safe areas, good schools, like minded community. We all know what that usually means. It means rich white Christian people flocking together and looking down on everybody else. Aesthetic gates. Pioneer cosplay and homestead reels that erase indigenous lands, Black agricultural traditions, and immigrant labor, and then call it our way of life. That phrase, that our way of life, it's very racially charged. Let's call it what it is: the traditional family pipeline to Project 2025, or it could be the Project 2025 pipeline to traditional family. Either way, it weaponizes the tradwife script to mass produce the next generation while safeguarding racial purity through policy. And all of this is why the tradwife role is so crucial to the system. She is tasked with curating the inputs, the friends, the lessons, the meals, the stories, so that racial hierarchy reproduces itself without ever needing to say the quiet part out loud. And you guys, I need those of you who've never been part of these communities before to see, to just take a look for a minute at the bits that aren't totally obvious on the surface. Food is propaganda. Purity talk isn't just about bodies, it's about belonging. It's about an in-group and an out-group. We feed our children the right way. The subtext is separation and superiority. We are clean, they are contaminating. Nazi propaganda really focused on this. President Trump calling liberals vermin, the in group, the out group. We are pure, you are contaminated. Having that mom at home teaching that preserves those ideologies for the next generation. It's sad how full history is of regimes that sold racial, religious, cultural purity through the family table. I don't think people understand how charged the dinner table dialogues and imagery are. Really important for me to clarify too. Loving your family and teaching your kids your culture and cooking good food together, it's beautiful. This is my one day a week that I'm going to cook dinner for my family. It's going to be beautiful. But when culture becomes a fence to keep other families out or to erase their histories, that's not tradition. That's domination. The patriarchy uses moms as the front line of that project, assigning them the job of protecting a racial, social, religious, cultural order under the banner of good motherhood. The cost? Our kids inherit fear. How do I know that? Because I was one of these kids. I was afraid of literally everybody. They grow up with thinner democracies, smaller friendships, and weaker immune systems to difference, less grit, less adaptability, and a lot more extremism, which is exactly the point of the stay at home mom. A population trained to fear the other is easier to control and easier to deploy politically and religiously. Now, I'm not saying every woman in a linen apron is a racist, purity obsessed, isolationist, religious extremist. I'm saying systems recruit us women, me once included, to do this cultural and ideological gatekeeping while calling it love, while calling it nurturing, while calling it mothering. And we as women deserve better than being cast as the border patrol of someone else's hierarchy. Our kids deserve a bigger table. The test of my theory, by the way, is the childless traditional wife. She seems pointless, right? Esty Williams, it's just this big tradwife influencer. She doesn't have kids. The trad girlfriend trend, they don't have kids. They're not even married. Suddenly, these women without the children are just servants to their men, and they have a totally different vibe. And that's because the point of the submissive woman isn't the woman at all. It's the kids. It's ensuring the future of the system itself. Remember when J.D. Vance said childless cow women aren't even real Americans? Because it doesn't make sense to him. If a woman isn't going to raise the next generation of Americans and replicate that system, then what the fuck do we even have her for? When influencers preach that tradwife purity but don't have children, that's when the mask slips. Because the system doesn't need a carefully controlled, immaculately submissive, childless woman. That's not the point. It's not about controlling women. It's about replication and replacement, ensuring the future of this system. If there are no children, there's no replication. The ideology reveals itself. Women are a means to an end. Their value is tied entirely to reproducing the system. Again, with Ballerina Farm, think about that glossy farm style content. The kids are pure and unpolluted. Family labor is romanticized. The family talks about how our kids will farm on this land here for generations. That's actually a quote from a speech that Daniel of Ballerina Farm made somewhere. I think it was some agricultural convention that he went to. And that's what he said. He's like, our kids will farm here for generations. And I'm not trying to attack Ballerina Farm or individual families. I'm naming the pattern. Nostalgia as a brand and album cover for social control. And even when real life doesn't match the Instagram that we see, like say the trad wife is actually a multi-millionaire business owner and not at all a stay-at-home mom, and she has a school teacher that teaches the kids for it. The aesthetic still markets purity and the continuity of the system. The system doesn't even care if these fake trad wives are fake. They just need people to buy into the tradwife life. Again, not because they're trying to ensnare women, but because they are trying to replicate the system. The fake tradwife is selling the system. She doesn't have to be a real tradwife. And it's time we burn this fucking system to the ground because it's been destroying lives for infinity and beyond. But the answer to this isn't women working and putting their babies in daycare and spending all of their money on that. Capitalism has forced us all into this either or situation. We have the factory dad plus the trad wife mom, or exhausted working parents where they're both working plus expensive daycare. That's not natural either. That's not traditional. That's not the way any of us are supposed to be doing it. That is a product of tribal decay and industrial capitalism. Ideally, children are raised by a web. Fathers, grandparents, aunties, uncles, neighbors, and mom, a family business, home based production that also sometimes involves the children, or community care where time together is normal and not a luxury. Everyone in these submissive women circles these days talks about how feminists destroyed it all, blew it all up. Feminists did not fucking destroy the home and family. You know who did? Bosses did. Long hours, low wages, lifelong debt with rent, mortgages, car payments, phone bills, medical insurance, gas, groceries. Then the system dumps the full weight of replication onto women and calls that tradition. It's not. So the women, like the trad wife that I used to be, end up lonely, stressed, and completely financially reliant on the man. And the system doesn't care. I had anxiety and depression for 24 years, off and on. Now I don't. I don't have a better therapist. I don't have any medication. Nothing has changed. I'm just not stuck in this system. Yes, even people in happy lives can have anxiety and depression. Mine was entirely 100% situational. And the system didn't care that I had anxiety and depression. They gave me a bunch of ridiculous ways to solve that, like go to church more, read my scriptures more, spend more time with my kids, and make sure I was really focusing on my family. And that's because the patriarchal structure that I was in needed a future labor and believer base. So it outsources a whole tribe's work onto one woman and calls it virtue, calls her a biblical woman. But this bullshit isn't biblical, I can tell you that. This isn't natural. Guess what it is? It's class warfare. Again, churches, politicians, corporations, banks extracting from families while selling purity as purpose. By the way, Yeshua in Christian mythology said something that I find really interesting about God and mammon. He said, you can't serve both. We can either nurture our people, our tribes, relationships, resources, or we can build capitalism's altar and sacrifice family to it. We can't do both. And yes, Trump and his Project 2025 crowd are openly trying to protect and replicate the system by force. Policies that push women back home, restrict rights, and funnel public money into private power aren't accidents. They're scaffolding for replication. Now, I want to be really clear that this video is not a dunk on moms at home. It's a critique of systems that use moms and use dads while keeping everyone too tired, isolated, and broke to build communities and build alternatives for our futures. My goal here isn't to shame women. It's to rebuild the tribe so no single mother is forced to be an entire village. Here's my call to action. I always like to give you guys homework. Reweave your webs. Trade childcare with neighbors. Include grandmas and teens. Co-cook, co-learn, co-garden. I'm literally always knocking on my neighbors' doors. I don't even text first. This morning, I've already spoken face-to-face to two of my neighbors. My one little neighbor who has some kids was on the other side of the parking lot, but I could see her when I was taking the trash out. So I rerouted so I could go spend a little time visiting with her. Number two, decouple from these purity scripts. This was a really hard one for me when I left MAGA and the church. Let your kids meet difference, religious, racial, cultural difference. That's how their social immune systems and democracies, by the way, get strong. Number 3, shrink consumerism. Buy less debt, share more tools, start tiny home-based enterprises that keep time and kids close. I'm doing that right. I exclusively run businesses from home. Number 4, read together. All kinds of different books, not just your church books or your party's books or your family's books. Open up the world to your children and yourself through books. 10 out of 10 recommend anything by Gabor Mate. He talks so much about stress, trauma, bonding, and society. Reading him will change the world. Remember that education is power. And on that topic, please join my book club. The link is in the description. Our first Audible book is totally free thanks to my publishing partner, Post Hypnotic Press. We're reading Feminism is for Everybody Now and mapping how systems shape our bodies, our parenting, and our politics. If this video helped connect some dots, like, comment, and share, especially share with young women in their life. Awareness and informed consent is everything. And send to a friend who thinks that tradwife is a cute aesthetic. It's not. It's a replication engine, and we can build something better. I firmly believe that. Thanks for watching, and please go spread some toxic empathy today. The world needs it. Mwah.